Greetings, my name is Chiboniso Nyoni and today we are joined by Mr. Emmanuel Devine Nyakudya. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me today.
Lovely. So here we are talking about the tertiary education in Zimbabwe, and what do you think about the affordability of school for people across different sectors or different environments, really, from rural to even urban areas?
Okay, thank you so much for this question. I think to start with, in Zimbabwe, it is a fact and a clear one that the state of the economy is bad, and not everyone can afford school and school fees, be it in primary education, basic education, and even higher tertiary education. But I think what we should first understand is that education is a human right, and every person should be able to access it and afford it. But also, coming to higher tertiary education, I'll give you an example of at the National University of Science and Technology, where I learn a quantity surveying student has to pay probably $700 for his tuition. A medical student at the University of Zimbabwe has to pay probably $1,200 for a semester. That's a kidney at a black market rate. A student studying law at probably the Middle East University has to pay about $796. But if you then put this in comparison to the basic civil servant salary, that's too high, that's not affordable, and there's no anywhere or any other mechanism where that student can be able to afford to pay their fees. So in general, I would say the fees in Zimbabwe is skyrocketed. It is ever high, and it, at the end of the day, keeps and brings a gap where only the elites, probably the rich, will be able to afford school fees, and the poor remain at the ground. So therefore, the affordability question is not in the range. It is not affordable. It is too high, and it skips other students and other people from attaining education in Zimbabwe.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned that it's likened, the price of school fees is likened to the cost of a kidney in the black market, which means that a semester, if I'm not mistaken, is worth a human life, if I say.
It is worth a human life and more. And I mean, our understanding of education as the Zimbabwe National Students Union is that education is a service, or it is a human good which should then be given to the society or to everyone else. So after having studied law, after having studied medicine, it should be able to then give back that service to the community. So at the end of the day, it should not be commodified. It should not be a mechanism of making money. It should just be a service where everyone in the society can be able to access it. So when a person then has to lose a life to get education, then we then question if it's really necessary to then have that education.
Okay. So above and beyond that, there's costs which affect everyone. Then how does gender play into it as a youth?
All right, that's a good question. So I'll give you an example of the current statistics provided by the Ministry of Education, which says that just in 2024, about an upward of 3,000 students dropped out of school, not because of anything, but because of pregnancy. So already this is a gap. And then we'll then come back to tertiary education. Of course, we'd appreciate that the Ministry of Higher Tertiary Education is, of course, recently, I think in probably 3 weeks, come up with what we call the gender and sexual harassment policies, which is a nationwide policy for higher tertiary education institutions. But before that, I mean, I would tell you instance where, because a student needs to pay school fees, a student needs to pay for their food, for their accommodation, they would then end up engaging in other activities that fund their livelihoods on campuses. If you get on campus, you get there and you find D4Ds, you find nice cars, and those nice cars are not owned by lecturers. The lecturers of Zimbabwean institutions cannot afford those nice cars. Those cars are not owned by students; they are owned by blessers who are trying to then cover the gap for the students. And I mean, female students at the end of the day, they become vulnerable in that aspect. But also, talking about gender, I think the government has at some point done justice in having institutions like the Women University in Africa, where there is a fair share through the quota system where they allow female students to enroll more than that, so that we can have a number of female students being in institutions. But overall, and over and beyond anything, female students are made vulnerable by such a situation in Zimbabwe.
Okay, so the year is 2025, right? And it's post COVID-19. So during that period, e-learning was introduced. How has the uptake been in schools and universities in particular?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I mean, it's said that we should say thank heaven that the COVID-19 came for us as Zimbabweans, so probably even as Africa, to be able to uptake e-learning in Zimbabwe and in the continent. But I think as an adjustment, yeah, there was a fair share of justice in the particular year 2020. But over that, I think we still find difficulties in adapting to e-learning. Why am I saying so? The training personnel, the lecturers, the tutors, they are not trained sufficiently enough to be able to provide teaching and lessons through this particular media. I'll give you an example where the university lecturers at the University of Zimbabwe are crying that in the $220 that they receive as their salaries, they have to pay data on that one. And if you understand, for you as a student, you need at least 15 gigabytes for you to survive for a month. Now imagine a lecturer, how is he going to survive in that capacity? So as much as it brought a wake-up call, which was just taken in for the first few years, probably the year 2023, the way 2020 up maybe to around 2022. Then now it's something that has been relaxed on and needs efficient uptake again. And I think when you talk about e-learning, it automatically brings in the issue of power and energy. I mean, there is more load shedding in Zimbabwe than anywhere else. And such a scenario gives us a situation where in Zimbabwe, everywhere in Zimbabwe, during the day, there are no lights. And at the end of the day, we won't be able to study or whatever, to use our laptops and everything and charge our machines. So it's again a major setback in the particular aspect of e-learning, though we really had the COVID-19 to wake us up and make us do so much in adopting e-learning. Over and beyond that, there's issue of the affordability of what do you call it, of data in Zimbabwe. So I mean, data in Zimbabwe will cost you so much, and the connectivity on campus. I mean, you go right now to Bulawayo Poly and try to connect to their Wi-Fi. Their Wi-Fi is as slow as you can think. It cannot do anything for you. So that's a major setback as well in terms of e-learning. And I'll give you an example as well, even of the University of Zimbabwe. They enroll about 500 students for programs like informatics and computer science. But of those 500 students, there are only 30 laptops which are supposed to be used in 3 weeks of modular learning and 1 week of an examination. And that's a major clear or signal that we are not ready for this e-learning. If we are ready, we haven't invested so much in this particular subject. And I think that is where we come in and continue to cry that if we are to provide a solution, if we are to implement something, let's execute those things by, number one, pushing in financial capacities, pushing in infrastructure to aid to those ideas that we have. E-learning is a great idea. It makes sure that a lot of people are enrolled in the institution, but also, as much as it is a good idea, let's make sure that we fund it sufficiently, and let's make sure that there's enough infrastructure for that. And I think talking also about equality and equity, myself, I learn and I'm in Bulawayo, and it's able and accessible for myself. But I mean, can you think of students at Rio Tinto down there in Shurugwi? They cannot in any way be able to access these particular services because, number one, there's no data. Number two, there's no network. Number three, there's no power in those spaces. And for instance, students in rural areas, they start using their own candles, but students in urban areas, they start using Google, they start using the infamous ChatGPT now. And such gaps now, they bring a lot of questions to the particular aspect of e-learning.
With the introduction of Education 5.0, there's been modular learning and other such activities happening. How has it been?
Okay, I think Education 5.0 is a milestone that we should really appreciate with the government of Zimbabwe. I think it's one of the best, no, not best, but it's one of a commendable solution, because I mean, like what we've always said, we're turning into a global village as the world, and we should appreciate that and turn in that direction. So, but I mean, to be simple, Education 5.0 speaks to innovation, entrepreneurship, sustainability, and also including cultural studies, heritage information for students. But I mean, the crisis comes back again on the issue where we talk of, we have great policies in Zimbabwe. We have always done so well in coming down with putting things on paper. But then when it comes to taking it from paper, then putting it into action, we have a very big syndrome that we have failed to work on. So I think, to particular, the innovation part of the Education 5.0 is not seen because, number one, there is no ideation. Ideation starts in classrooms, and in classrooms, what's happening? There are no lecturers. There's nothing to do in those lecturers. And again, there's an issue of infrastructure. I mean, you go to NAST, the innovation hub at NAST is used as a reception to offer people gowns for their graduations. I mean, they've turned an innovation hub to be a reception for gowns. So in such an instance, the innovation part is not seen. I mean, Education 5.0 also talks about the heritage aspect, but I think it's being abused now. You talk of institutions like the MSU. You go to MSU, you hear the heritage studies that they're being taught. There are partisan information that are being taught in those particular institutions. I mean, you cannot train a medical doctor from the University of Zimbabwe or even from the National University of Science and Technology and teach him or her for 3 weeks, and then the fourth week expect him to write an exam, and then in the course of 7 years of those random up and downs, want him to practice. That's not how you do things. I think there's a deliberate need for investment of time, of human resources, and even of financial capacities to finance such ideas. The modular learning is adequate and fine in particular programs, but not in the whole learning programs of university learning. I mean, the particular programs where people will tell you and attest that, no, this is the learning model which we need so that we can be able to grasp ideas and be able to keep up with those ideas. But I mean, you cannot take an engineer and allow him to go through a modular learning. It just basically does not work in that way.
Okay. And how has it been for the other students as well? I realize that you now have 2 exams per semester instead of 1 exam season.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, when you say how has it been with the students, I mean, I'm a student and also I represent the students. So whatever I'm saying today is what exactly the students feel like. And maybe what I would say is, again, before we talk about anything else, after having paid your tuitions, there's also the cost of living, and you understand. I mean, the time that is needed in studying. So you learn for maybe 3 weeks. In the fourth week, you write your exam. In 5 weeks, you are doing 2 modules. After those 5 weeks, you go again for another 2 weeks, and so your time on campus is now too much. And also, even the idea of grasping, probably by the time the module, what do you call it, the semester ends, you won't remember the first module that you were learning in the first part of the semester. So again, it's a crying alarm on campuses in every learning institution. Students are crying because of this modular learning. Again, the main reason why it's making students cry right now is because students were excluded in the formation of such a curriculum. Coming up with the modular learning curriculum, they're supposed to go on campuses, go to Blaue Poly, go to NAS, to go to MSU, go to the different universities, let the students give them their inputs in such instances, and then at the end of the day, when they implement an idea, the idea is accepted, because the idea is that if people do not have personal confidence in the things that you're bringing to them, they automatically sabotage it, they automatically do not appreciate it. At the end of the day, it will not feed any good to the students, and above all to the industry which you're transitioning into.
Thank you for that. And as the National Secretary General of ZINASU in Zimbabwe, right? You guys are representatives of the students in universities. is the environment in universities conducive for you guys to become leaders and to implement your, shall I say, views?
Okay, thank you so much for this question. Definitely not. Definitely not. It's very sad that as the Zimbabwe National Students Union, we are seen probably as a terrorist organization or what so forth. But I mean, to be precise, as the Zimbabwe National Students Union, we are an institution which believes in the coming of a democratic Zimbabwe, an inclusive Zimbabwe, in which academic freedoms are upheld, with students being the major stakeholders of such an initiative. That's pretty much our job. But then it's said, and I think this comes also from the part that our deans of students, our registrars, and the administrative part of institutions, including the vice chancellors, are not elected, or they are not put into power because of meritocracy. They are put in there because of their ability to raise their right fist, and support a particular political party. So in that instance, when we then come and we try to be very mature and bring our own ideas, we are dismissed at the first go. We are not allowed to share in our ideas. I'll give an example of the National University of Science and Technology. The Zimbabwe National Students Union, I mean, the students' body had an SRC election. The Zimbabwe National Students Union won that SRC election. After winning that SRC election, bogus lies came in. They did another SRC election. We won again that same SRC election. Again, were dismissed because they knew that when we get into power, we're going to represent the students, we're going to say what the students want, but then they knew that their own ideas would then be shattered. What they want to impose on students will not be able to happen. That so they imposed a female leader, whom I'm sure should be ashamed of that, because they impose and they make a pony to do the things that they want. I'll give you examples of the Ablawa Poli. I'll give you examples of the University of Zimbabwe, where we had SRC candidates that were disqualified on the basis of just being ZINASU and trumped up charges. I'll give you again even a Great Zimbabwe University, where we were doing SRC elections, but then from a goal, you then see the portals shifting. So there's a deliberate sabotage of the Zimbabwe Students Union by the administrative institutions. I'll also give you of current happenings that are happening right now at the Midland State University. We have 5 students. 4 of them were suspended, particularly Kigen Mate, who was the chapter chair, and also the secretary general of the same institution, who was also expelled for particularly just wearing ZINASU t-shirts and recruiting students into ZINASU. I don't know how that can be a crime, and I don't know how they justify it, and we equally challenge it in courts. But this is to show you of how the administrative parts of institutions have seen us as a terrorist organization if they've tried to silence us. So whenever we try to bring our ideas, whenever we try to run SRCs, whenever we do anything, we are either made by suspensions, we are either made by expulsions. I mean, the same thing happened even with the Great Zimbabwe University. We have Darlington Matola, we have Linus Mnogwei, we have Chapua Chingosho. Those guys, they were suspended for literally just doing an appraisal of their dean, telling you to know our dean of students of the student affairs, who at any point is supposed to be the person we interact with every day. They were telling him in a WhatsApp group that, comrade, these things we are failing. The accommodation is bad in this particular instance. You are failing to do 1, 2, 3. And the following morning, they were given eviction notices of the halls of residence, and right now they're on suspension for particularly just asking questions of need. So I mean, we are sabotaged, and we are left out. But I mean, you can never delegitimize the voice of the voiceless. You can never delegitimize the barometers of class consciousness. You can never delegitimize the vanguards of the oppressed. If we represent the oppressed, we are a movement of the oppressed. The oppressed will always rise, and the students will always be able to get what they want. So as much as they've tried to all those shenanigans, we've always represented the students, and whatever we want as students will get.
Okay. We have a situation where the leaders know their powers, but do the students know what their leaders can do for them?
Yeah, I think they are. So we as the Zimbabwe National Students Union, we refer higher tertiary institutions as holes where we find barometers of class consciousness. So we believe that anyone who comes to a higher tertiary education institution is someone who's woke, is someone who's intellectual, and it's someone who cannot sell a blank idea. That is why you find out that when we are on campuses and we are having SRC elections, and a particular party comes with their students and they want to give the students perfumes, money, and all that, the students, they'll take that, they'll eat it, they'll take that, they'll weigh it. But then when it comes to elections, they'll vote for the Zimbabwe National Students Union. Both the students, they are aware of the needs that they want. And I think poverty and the daily problems that we face as students are not made up things. These are realities that students are living. I mean, you go right now to maybe Kwekwe Poly, you find out that there's a student who is failing to get into an examination because they don't have school fees and they have to defer. I mean, you go right now to maybe another college, maybe Kushinga College. You go to Kushinga College today, you find out that there are students who are living in one room and there's about 7 of them. And these are lived realities. So when we then come to represent them, they know the power that they have. But of course, I mean, there is a part which has been instilled by the government, probably the institutions, like what I was giving you earlier about the expulsions, about arrests, about abductions, about tortures, which are put on student leaders so that they can demobilize the students from actioning and doing activities. But rest assured that students know exactly the power that they have, and that is the reason why they continue to send us and they continue to deploy us to those platforms to represent them, because they know that we are able as students to fight and to stand for what we want and for the academic freedoms that we desire.
You've been both an SRC leader and a student leader as well, in terms of ZINASU, right?
Yeah.
How do students then call their leaders into accountability if they maybe defect?
Okay, so in the administrative governance of an institution, that's probably NAST and maybe the University of Zimbabwe or maybe Harare Poly or any other institution out there. There are constitutions that guide the Students' Union, and these constitutions are very clear on how you can seek for accountability. I mean, there's an Ordinance 30 that is, if announced, I mean, the same has been recycled actually in so many institutions. But basically, what it then tells you to do is, number one, there's an ability for you as a students' union, that's all the students that are on campus. There's an ability through the SRC to recall a particular individual and say, no, this individual hasn't been working, hasn't delivered on this 1, 2, 3, and we want him to be put down. And then the SRC sits down, they reach a quorum, they follow the particular way in that way. There's also what is called the annual general meetings that every SRC has to go through. In those annual general meetings, I mean, during our time, we had one which filled the ceremonial hall, where the students come in and they engage with the leaders. I mean, from the president up until to the SRC Minister of Sports or so forth. And then they say what they've done and what they haven't done. And then they are allowed to raise their hand and say, no, this one needs to step down. The same applies with the nation. So with the Zimbabwe National Students Union. The Zimbabwe National Students Union, in which I'm the Secretary General right now, there's a constitution which also guides and says if you can reach a two-thirds majority and decide that the Secretary General is not performing, you can equally not recall him, but you can equally put a vote of no confidence and let him step aside and let some other person lead. So yeah, those are ways of putting to accountability. But I feel like it's not really about the students for me to put in so much. I mean, like I told you that this has never been tried. You get it? Of course, in some instances, students have tried to ask for a vote of no confidence on particular individuals and they have left. But the issue is on that you cannot put a vote of no confidence on the dean, on the registrars, on those guys. They have blocked any way and any voice that tries to seek for accountability. So you cannot ask of how your money works on campus. If you try to do that, rest assured the following morning you are going to receive your suspension letter. Rest assured, you're going to fail your exams. Rest assured, they are going to put so many charges on you. And that is very unnecessary. Like you said, we as student leaders, we should be able to account. And we agree to that. We should be able to account. There should be a social contract between, first of all, in this case of students and the administration, between the student and the administration. And if there's that social contract where we say, no, we as the students, we are paying this particular amount to get this, and you fail to get that, this is what we want you guys to do. We should be able to do that. But unfortunately, if you try to do that in Zimbabwe, I mean, you find the different number of trucks of ZITE on campuses with their shambox to deal with you.
You've outlined very important and interesting problems. So, what sort of homegrown solutions and innovations can you bring forward?
I'm a young Pan-African, and I believe so much in that. In everything that we do, we should never run away from home. We should be able to address our solutions. I think my belief in education is that we should be able, through education, to answer to our daily needs as Africans, as young people, as Zimbabweans, and even as part of the society that we are in. So we should be able to deliver back to those communities. And talking of homegrown solutions, I mean, it's a clear fact that a majority of our students are into drug abuse right now. A majority of students that are graduating into jobless non-existence in Zimbabwe. And my view of how we can deal with this is particularly being able to set institutions in every area. So we say here in Bulawayo, in Jube, we have a vocational training center where we teach this particular skill, and we accommodate those people and they are trained. We go down there in Cholocho. We say in Cholocho we are going to have an institution which is going to teach people of agri-tech. I mean, I saw recently that there are many universities that have just recently brought in degrees that are in agri-tech and something like that, which is a thing that we can appreciate, because I mean, it's a fact that we can produce so much, and with the training of our global sphere in the world, we should be able to adapt, to use drones in our farming, we should be able to use engineering in engineering our feeds and even our harvest in different things. So my belief is that we should be able to address those things by having institutions in those particular instances. But I'll also give you an example that in Zimbabwe, just in 2024, an upward of 49,000 students dropped out of school. So I want you to think that if 49,000 students dropped out of school in 1 year, how many are going to drop out of school? And those people are not people we can dismiss as probably academically no talent or something. These are people probably that could not get school fees. These are people probably that could not get someone to push them to go to school. These are people probably that had a school which was very far away from where they were. And these people need to get skills. And I believe that we can give them skills by establishing vocational training centers as much as we can, and making sure that knowledge is given to everyone, and that everyone is able to access education, and also find the problems that we have in our societies and address those problems first.
When you think of activism, particularly student activism, you start thinking about student unions. Are student unions pushing student activism enough in universities?
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's a great question, and I mean that's why also we are here as Zimbabwe National Students Union, because student activism is what we breathe. It is what we know, and ultimately our blood is blue because of student union. And maybe what I would say, probably to answer your question, there's only one student union in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe National Students Union. Of course, I've heard of other groupings that are political parties that masquerade on campuses, eating state resources and taxpayers' money as political parties that like to be representing students. I think there's one called ZINASU or something like that. They are not students' union. They don't represent students. They represent political parties. And this is what we've always argued. Those people, they dine with ministers. They go to the State House. They meet the chancellor face to face every day. But when they meet the chancellor, they cannot ask him the questions. I mean, the conversation that they will be having are stupid questions of bonds and soup. When they're supposed to be asking real questions, when they meet the ministers, when they meet the members of parliament, whenever they meet, they don't ask them of the situations that the students are facing. I can tell you right now that it's because they say nothing right now pertaining the lecturers that are striking. They've said absolutely nothing right now pertaining overhiked fees. They've said absolutely nothing right now of institutions and the shrinking civic space. And I mean, student activism is very alive, though they have tried so much and they're still trying so much to silence it. How do they silence it? They silence it by arresting us. I mean, we plan a general council. We are the Secretary General of the National Students Union. And as the Secretary General of the Students Union, you get to plan the general councils, you get to plan different programs. And whenever you plan a program, for you to be able to do that event, you have to lie that this is a church activity so that you can do the activity. We cannot be on campuses. The students that I was telling you from Middle State University, including our National Legal Secretary of the National Students Union, were suspended from any institution because of wearing ZINASU t-shirts. That's bloodshed killing of student activism. I'll tell you of SRCs. SRCs are being cut off. Some institutions are going over 3 years without SRCs. That is trying to kill student activism. There is arrest, like I said. There is torture. There's abductions. I mean, we have seen so many times the president of the Zimbabwe National Students Union. There's another time when he was coming from Victoria Falls and he was taken at the airport for just being a president of the Students' Union. So student activism, it is alive, but there have been so many attempts to kill it. And I can reliably tell you that they can never kill the Students' Union. But the Students' Union is not an individual. The Students' Union, it is a representation of all the students in all tertiary institutions in Zimbabwe, and it will always thrive. So my point still remains the same. That student activism in Zimbabwe is not dead. It is not going to die, and it will never die. It will continue representing students in Zimbabwe. And the other political parties that must go on campus should stop that. I'll give an example of the MSU as well. At MSU, there are people who go on campuses saying they're student unions, but they're wearing T-shirts with party regalias, with party names, with faces of individuals, and they say they're non-partisan. Those students are left on campus, but our 4 students, they're expelled from campus. That's being partisan, and that's being very petty, especially from coming from an administration.
Okay. How is the outlook of education in Africa in general?
Okay, talking of education in Africa, I think we have a long way to go, in particular in making sure that there is harmonization and recognition of education in Africa. So in this we are talking of an Emmanuel Nyakudya that finishes his studies here, and people when then goes and study elsewhere, is he able to practice there, or will find issues where probably the Zimbabwe Council of Tertiary Education will then say, if you go and learn in Zambia and you study your medicine and you're done, when you come back to Zimbabwe, you won't be able to practice because we don't recognize you. So I think we have a long way to go as a region in making sure that there's harmonization of education, that we collaborate as a continent and be able to work together. I mean, it's a fact that we go so far as a continent that is working together and that is allocating each other things and be able to practice. I mean, a mining engineer who practices in Zimbabwe should be able to finish and go and work for the mining company in Botswana easily and without any problems. But also talking of education in Africa, it is very sad that the same shrinking space that we see in Zimbabwe is the same that is happening in areas like Uganda. I'll tell you, we have a comrade called Akiso Benjamin, a very great student leader, one of the best. He was voted with over 80% of the students populace on their campus. But after having been voted into power as an SRC, they fought to make sure that students without full payment, they can be able to write and sit for their exams. The administration refused that. They protested. And again, just like what we are seeing here in Zimbabwe, those particular students were suspended and him was expelled, and we continue to stand with such comrades. And the same happens. I mean, the hegemon of Eswatini delivers to us a same scenario again, where students cannot voice their voices, they are voiceless, and they cannot do anything. They cannot particularly say anything. And I believe that we as students, we should never be made to be silent on any particular issue. We should be able to continue to raise our concerns even in the midst of such shrinking civic spaces.
What is the impact of economic and political context? I mean, we see currency instabilities, we see policy changes. What is the impact of all this on students?
Okay, I think I'll start with the police part. I think I'll maintain my point that this otherwise policy shifting and whatever reform thing does not bring anything if it remains a policy. It remains a seed which is being planted on tarmac. For us to be able to harvest, we need to get good grounds and we should be able to implement. So these policies should not just remain as policies, they should be implemented. And I think coming back to the economic and political landscape of Zimbabwe, I think one of the concerning things in Zimbabwe is corruption. There is rampant corruption in Zimbabwe. I mean, we've been seeing on social media how so many of the highly glorified people of politics, of economics, of everything, and even lecturers, real little lecturers, are being seen buying degrees so that they can be called doctors. That's corruption, and we should not. The Zimbabwe Council for Tertiary Education should not let that go unpunished. I mean, that's bad, and it limits our capacities and even our credibility in other spaces. I mean, a person with a PhD can no longer say it with pride now because they'll be questioned if it's not bought. I mean, we should understand that, like we said earlier, researches and academic work should be protected as high value work and should not be limited to such corruption work. And also, talking of corruption, I mean, we've seen how political parties have turned institutions into being baseless places where they come to do their rallies, where they come and do whatever their political gains work. That should stop. That should not happen in a fair and fine Zimbabwe. That can only happen if there are particular peoples and particular individuals, both in students and both in investor administrations, that are eating with it. But also, not just of corruption. We also, I mean, there's a recent development of the PVO Act, and we cannot be silent on such an act that has come to a point. It will definitely crash some of the work. I mean, the different institutions that have been working in informing students, in informing young people, and that their work will be stopped. I mean, there will be so much interference with their work. I mean, it will be hard for them to operate, and such things should be called out. But also, I think I should also mention clearly of agendas like what we've heard, the Agenda 2030s of people who want to renew and stay in leadership, particularly our Chancellor. We believe that is unnecessary. We believe that leadership, like diapers, they ought to be changed. And in this particular instance, we believe that after a person has led and he has finished his term, they should vacate office and put in other new people to get into power. I mean, the president or our chancellor, to be precise, has kept enough unemployed graduates, and I think he should not be proud anymore to continue keeping more unemployed graduates. And talking of this idea of ageism, where the old people want to continue in power, should be addressed by young people that also take positions of interest, young people that also call it out. So, to be precise, I think these are main issues politically that have affected even our work, because this Agenda 2030 has seen our institutions now turning into campaign works, now turning into, I mean, the ceremonial halls of every institution have now turned. Every Friday you find that in every institution in Zimbabwe, all the ceremonial halls, they are occupied by a political party that is pushing this whatsoever Vision 2030, which is unnecessary. I mean, those institutions should be used to write exams. I'll give you an example of institutions which cannot even fund students to go and write exams to a particular venue, but the same institutions, they are free to put out their buses to fuel that Vision 2030. So I believe that those things should be addressed, and such things have to be addressed not with complacency, but with particular agency.
Thank you for that. Do you have any particular parting shots or wise words?
Okay, I think from us as the Zimbabwe National Students Union, the only student organization that I represent, uh, we believe that the judiciary is captured and that needs to be addressed. We also believe that we need a reform in particular concerning the security state of Zimbabwe. I mean, you plan to have a prayer meeting right now. If myself and you yourself we treat today that in the next 2 hours we will be at the Light City Hall to pray as young people. You will find so many police officers there trying to arrest us. But I'm telling you that right now, if someone shoots someone there, they'll take years to visit such a place. That's something that needs to be addressed in a reform that needs urgent attention. But also, I think all this that we've been saying comes from a poor economy. We need economic reform. We need a total overshaft of our economy as Zimbabwe. We need a better economy. I believe that everyone, every citizen should be able to access education beyond their background. And that's my belief. And I believe that in our lifetime as students and even as young people, we are going to see a better Zimbabwe. A Zimbabwe which Baba Joshua Nkomo thought of, in which the young will be in charge, in which everyone will have access to education, in which we'll be able to be employed, in which we as workers in transition will be able to be paid whilst still being trained, just like how soldiers and police officers are done. So I believe and I hope a better Zimbabwe is coming, and it comes from the young people that take it to them to fulfill their generational mission of bringing total economic emancipation of the land of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us and watching. Follow CITE for more news and more information.